In the quiet corners of a classroom, where innocent voices blend with the rustle of turning pages, sometimes the most unsettling mysteries begin with the simplest sounds. A melody, hummed by small lips, can carry secrets that adults have spent decades trying to bury. When the past refuses to stay silent, it often speaks through the most vulnerable among us, weaving threads of forgotten guilt into the fabric of everyday life. What begins as a teacher's concern for an unusual student behavior soon becomes a journey into dark territories, where childhood innocence collides with adult sins, and where a simple folk tune holds the key to truths that some would kill to keep hidden. Sarah Chen had been teaching third grade for 12 years, long enough to recognize when something wasn't quite right with one of her students. She prided herself on being observant. It came with the territory when you were responsible for 28 8-year-olds for 6 hours a day. But Emma Hartwell had been testing those observational skills for the past 3 weeks. It started with the humming. At first, Sarah had found it charming. Emma was a quiet child, new to Lincoln Elementary since the beginning of October, and the soft melody that occasionally drifted from her desk during independent reading time seemed harmless enough. Some children talked to themselves while they worked. Others tapped their pencils or swung their legs. Emma hummed, but as the days passed, the humming became more frequent, more persistent, and always the same tune, a haunting minor key melody that seemed far too sophisticated for a child to know by heart. It would weave through math lessons, surface during art class, and continue even during lunch in the cafeteria. "Emma, sweetheart," Sarah had said gently one afternoon, crouching beside the girl's desk. "That's a beautiful song you're humming. Where did you learn it?" Emma had looked up with those large, dark eyes that seemed to hold shadows no 8-year-old should carry. "I don't know," she'd whispered. "It just comes." That was a week ago. Since then, the humming had intensified. Other students were beginning to notice, some giggling behind their hands, others looking genuinely disturbed by the repetitive, melancholy tune. Sarah had tried redirecting Emma's attention, suggesting she save her songs for music class, even offering her a stress ball to keep her hands busy. Nothing worked. This morning, as autumn sunlight streamed through the classroom windows and the children worked on their spelling worksheets, Emma's humming rose above the quiet scratching of pencils like smoke from a dying fire. The melody was clear, unmistakable, and suddenly terrifyingly familiar. Sarah's red correction pen slipped from her fingers, leaving a crimson streak across Tommy Morrison's perfectly spelled vocabulary list. Her hands began to shake as the tune continued, each note falling like stones into the still water of her carefully maintained composure. She knew that song. The memory hit her with the force of a physical blow, 30 years collapsing into nothing as she was transported back to Millbrook, Pennsylvania, to summer evenings when she was 17 and the world seemed full of endless possibilities. She could almost smell the honeysuckle that grew along Miller's Creek, could almost feel the warm grass beneath her bare feet as she and her best friend sat by the water, sharing secrets and dreams. Katie used to sing that song, Katie Morrison, before she married and became Katie Sullivan, before everything went wrong, before the accident that changed everything. Katie, who had learned the old folk song from her grandmother, who sang it whenever she was nervous or scared or happy. Katie, who had been humming that exact melody the last time Sarah ever saw her alive. "Mrs. Chen, are you okay?" Sarah blinked, suddenly aware that her third graders were staring at her with expressions ranging from curiosity to concern. Emma had stopped humming, her small face creased with worry. "I'm fine," Sarah managed, her voice steadier than she felt. She bent to retrieve her pen, using the moment to compose herself. "Just remembered something I forgot to do earlier." But she wasn't fine. As the morning progressed and Emma's humming resumed, softer now but still audible, Sarah found herself watching the child with new intensity. Where had Emma learned Katie's song? It wasn't something you'd hear on the radio or pick up from a movie. It was an old Appalachian folk tune, the kind passed down through families sung by grandmothers to their grandchildren while they shelled peas on front porches or rocked babies to sleep. During lunch, while her students were in the cafeteria, Sarah sat at her desk and opened her laptop. Her fingers hesitated over the keyboard before she typed Emma Hartwell into the school's student information system. The file was sparse. Emma had transferred from a school in Millbrook, Pennsylvania just 6 weeks ago. Her guardian was listed as Margaret Hartwell, grandmother, mother's name, Jennifer Hartwell. Father, unknown. Sarah's blood turned to ice water. Jennifer Hartwell. The name was different, but those eyes. Emma had Katie's eyes. The same dark brown, the same shape, the same way of looking at you as if she could see straight through to your soul. With trembling fingers, Sarah pulled up the internet browser and searched for Jennifer Hartwell in Millbrook, Pennsylvania. The results were sparse and troubling. A missing person report filed 6 weeks ago. A small article in the local paper about a woman who had disappeared, leaving behind her 8-year-old daughter and elderly mother. No leads, no suspects, no trace. The timeline matched perfectly with Emma's enrollment at Lincoln Elementary. Sarah closed the laptop and pressed her palms against her eyes, trying to push away the memories that were flooding back. But Katie's voice was in her head now, singing that damned song, and with it came all the guilt and pain she'd spent 3 decades trying to forget. The afternoon seemed to drag on forever. Every time Emma hummed, Sarah felt another piece of her carefully constructed life crack and fall away. When the final bell rang and the children began gathering their backpacks and lunchboxes, Sarah made a decision that she knew she'd probably regret. "Emma," she called softly as the girl headed toward the door. "Could you stay for just a minute? I'd like to talk to you." Emma approached her desk with the cautious wariness of a child who had learned not to trust easily. "Am I in trouble?" "No, sweetheart, not at all." Sarah knelt down to Emma's eye level, searching those familiar features for any trace of the friend she'd lost so long ago. "I just wanted to ask you about your song again, the one you've been humming." Emma's small shoulders tensed. "I can't help it, it just won't stop." "I know. Sometimes songs get stuck in our heads like that." Sarah kept her voice gentle, non-threatening. "But this particular song, it's very special, very old. I'm wondering if maybe your mum taught it to you." For a moment, Emma's composure cracked, and Sarah saw the scared, lonely child beneath the surface. "Mummy used to sing it when she was sad. She said it was her mama's song, and her mama's song. She said it helped the sadness go away." "Where is your mummy now, Emma?" The question hung in the air between them, heavy with implications that an 8-year-old couldn't possibly understand. Emma's eyes filled with tears that she blinked back with the stoicism of a child who had learned crying didn't fix anything. "She went away. Grandma says she might not come back." Sarah's heart clenched. "I'm so sorry, honey. That must be very scary for you." Emma nodded, then looked up at Sarah with an expression that was far too old for her years. "Do you know my mama's song, Mrs. Chen? You looked scared when I was humming it." The directness of the question caught Sarah off guard. Children were more perceptive than adults gave them credit for, and Emma was clearly brighter than most. There was no point in lying. "I knew someone who used to sing that song," Sarah said carefully. "A long time ago, when I was about your age." "What happened to them?" The innocent question hit like a physical blow. Sarah saw Katie's face as clearly as if she were standing in the classroom, 17 years old, laughing at something Sarah had said, her long brown hair catching the last light of summer as they walked home from the creek. Katie, who had trusted her. Katie, who had died because of choices Sarah had made. "She died," Sarah whispered. Emma nodded, as if this made perfect sense. "My grandma says people die when they have too much sadness inside them. Maybe that's why Mommy sang the sad song so much." The wisdom of it, delivered so matter-of-factly by a child, nearly broke Sarah's composure entirely. She stood up quickly, needing distance, needing air, needing time to think. "Your grandmother is probably waiting for you," she said, her voice thick with emotions she couldn't name. "You should go." Emma gathered her backpack and headed for the door, but paused at the threshold. "Mrs. Chen, if you knew someone who sang the sad song, maybe you know why it won't stop playing in my head." Before Sarah could respond, Emma was gone, leaving behind only the echo of her words and the faint memory of that haunting melody. Sarah sank into her chair, her mind reeling with possibilities, all of them terrible. If Emma was Katie's granddaughter, then Jennifer Hartwell was Katie's daughter, a daughter Katie never got the chance to raise because she died at 17, pregnant and afraid, running away from a truth that might have destroyed everything. But how was that possible? Katie had died in the accident. Sarah had been there. She had seen. The memory she'd spent 30 years suppressing came flooding back with crystal clarity. The rain that night, the winding road, the moment when everything went wrong, and innocent laughter turned to screaming metal and broken glass. The choice Sarah had made in the aftermath. The choice that had haunted her ever since. Katie hadn't died in that car accident. Sarah had assumed she had let everyone believe she had, but Katie had survived long enough to give birth to a daughter who grew up without knowing the truth about her mother's disappearance, who learned an old folk song passed down through generations of women who carried their sorrows in melody and verse. And now that daughter was missing, and her child was humming Katie's song like a prayer or a warning, and Sarah was the only one who understood what it meant. As the school emptied around her and shadows lengthened across her classroom floor, Sarah knew her past had finally caught up with her. The song that had once been a bridge between two teenage friends had become a thread connecting 3 generations of women, and Sarah was standing at the center of a web that she had helped weave 3 decades ago. Emma's humming had stopped for now, but Sarah knew it would return tomorrow and the day after that, and every day until the truth was finally told. The question was whether Sarah had the courage to face what she had done, and whether she could save Emma from the legacy of secrets and lies that had already claimed too much. Outside, the October wind rattled the windows, and Sarah thought she could hear, just for a moment, the echo of Katie's voice singing that old sad song. But this time it didn't sound like comfort. It sounded like a reckoning. That evening, Sarah sat in her small apartment kitchen, a cup of cold coffee growing rings on the table beside her laptop. She'd been staring at the same web page for 20 minutes, the missing person report for Jennifer Hartwell. The woman in the photograph had Katie's eyes, Katie's delicate bone structure, but her face carried lines of worry and exhaustion that spoke of a life lived in shadows. The report was dated 6 weeks ago, filed by Margaret Hartwell, Jennifer's mother-in-law. Jennifer had left their Millbrook home on a Tuesday morning, telling her daughter she'd be back by dinner. She never returned. Her car was found 3 days later in the parking lot of a truck stop 50 miles away, keys still in the ignition, purse untouched on the passenger seat. Sarah rubbed her temples, trying to process the implications. If Jennifer was Katie's daughter, then Margaret Hartwell wasn't Emma's grandmother. She was her step-grandmother, the mother of Jennifer's deceased husband. The family structure was becoming clearer, but it only raised more questions. She picked up her phone and hesitated for a long moment before dialing a number she hadn't called in 15 years. Millbrook Police Department, Detective Martinez speaking. Hello, this is Sarah Chen. I'm calling about the Jennifer Hartwell missing person case. I may have some information. There was a pause, the sound of papers shuffling. Ms. Chen, are you calling from the Pittsburgh area? Yes. Jennifer's daughter is in my class here, Emma Hartwell. Ah yes, we've been in touch with Pittsburgh Social Services about the girl's placement. What information do you have? Sarah took a deep breath. I think Jennifer might be connected to an old case from Millbrook, from 1994. A hit-and-run accident involving a girl named Katie Morrison. The silence on the other end stretched so long that Sarah wondered if the call had dropped. Finally, Detective Martinez spoke, his voice carefully neutral. That's a cold case, Ms. Chen. What makes you think there's a connection? Emma has been humming a song, an old folk song that Katie Morrison used to sing. It's very specific, very unusual. And Emma, she has Katie's eyes. Another pause. Ms. Chen, I think we should meet in person. Are you able to come to Millbrook this weekend? The drive to Millbrook took 3 hours, winding through Pennsylvania's rolling hills as autumn painted the landscape in shades of gold and crimson. Sarah hadn't been back to her hometown in over a decade, and seeing the familiar landmarks stirred emotions she'd thought were long buried. The police station was new, a modern brick building that replaced the old stone structure she remembered from her youth. Detective Martinez was younger than she'd expected, probably mid-40s, with kind eyes and graying temples that spoke of too many difficult cases. Thank you for coming, he said, leading her to a small conference room. I've pulled the Katie Morrison file. It's been cold for 30 years, but we never officially closed it. He spread the contents across the table, crime scene photos, witness statements, newspaper clippings yellowed with age. Sarah's chest tightened as she saw Katie's senior photo, the same one that had appeared in the local paper with the headline, "Local Teen Dies in Hit-and-Run Accident." What can you tell me about Katie Morrison? Martinez asked. Sarah forced herself to look at the photos, at the scene she'd tried so hard to forget. She was my best friend. We were both 17, seniors at Millbrook High. She was She was special, kind, funny, always singing. She knew all these old songs her grandmother had taught her. According to the file, she was found on Millers Creek Road around midnight on September 15, 1994. Apparent hit and run. The driver was never found. Sarah nodded, her throat tight. She was walking home from my house. We'd been studying together. You were the last person to see her alive. Yes. The word came out as barely a whisper. Martinez leaned forward. Sarah, I need to ask you something, and I want you to think carefully before you answer. Is there anything about that night that you didn't tell the police 30 years ago? The question hung in the air like a loaded gun. Sarah stared at the crime scene photos, at the stretch of road where Katie had been found, and felt the weight of 3 decades of guilt pressing down on her chest. There was more to the story, she said finally. Katie was pregnant. Martinez's eyebrows rose. That's not in the file. She found out 2 weeks before she died. She was terrified, didn't know what to do. Her parents were strict Catholics. She was sure they'd disown her. She was planning to run away. Who was the father? Sarah closed her eyes. Tommy Sullivan. He was a year older, already graduated. Star quarterback, full scholarship to Penn State. Katie thought he loved her, but when she told him about the baby, he didn't want anything to do with it. Worse, he denied it was his, called her names, said she was trying to trap him. She was heartbroken. Martinez made notes, his expression grim. So she was planning to leave town. Do you think she might have survived the accident? Gone into hiding? Sarah had been dreading this question for 3 hours. I don't know, I always assumed the injuries looked so severe in the photos, but there was never a body, was there? Just blood, her clothes torn on the guardrail? No body, Martinez confirmed. We always assumed it had been washed downstream, but Millers Creek was shallow that time of year. We searched for weeks. Sarah felt sick. All these years, she'd carried the guilt of Katie's death, and Katie might have been alive, might have given birth to Jennifer, might have lived for decades before her daughter inherited the same cursed legacy. Detective, there's something else. About the accident itself. Martinez waited. I was there that night. Not at the scene, but I saw what happened. The admission hung between them like a confession. Martinez set down his pen and gave her his full attention. Katie had called me around 11:30. She was upset, said she'd made up her mind to leave town the next morning. She wanted to say goodbye. I met her at the bridge over Millers Creek. Sarah's voice began to shake as the memory came flooding back. We talked for maybe 20 minutes. She was scared, but determined. Said she couldn't stay in Millbrook, couldn't face the shame. She gave me a letter to give to her parents, explaining everything. What happened to the letter? I still have it. I never gave it to them. I was young and scared, and after the accident, Sarah shrugged helplessly. It seemed cruel to destroy their memory of her. Go on. About that night. Katie started walking home around midnight. I was supposed to drive her, but my car wouldn't start. She said it was fine, that the walk would help her think. I was going to call my dad to come pick us up, but she insisted. Sarah paused, gathering courage for the hardest part. I followed her. I don't know why. Maybe I was worried. Maybe I had a bad feeling. I stayed back, walking parallel to the road through the trees. I saw her reach the bend near the Morrison farm. And a car came around the curve too fast. Dark-colored, maybe blue or black. Katie stepped off the road, but the driver overcorrected and hit the guardrail. The car bounced back and... Sarah's voice broke. It hit her. Did you see the driver? This was the moment Sarah had been dreading for 30 years. The secret that had eaten away at her conscience. The knowledge that had shaped every decision she'd made since that night. Yes, I saw him get out of the car, check on Katie. She was unconscious but breathing. I was about to run to help when I heard him on his cell phone. What did he say? He was calling someone, asking what to do. He said he'd been drinking, that his scholarship would be gone if anyone found out. He said... Sarah swallowed hard. He said he couldn't go to prison for some slut who was trying to ruin his life. Martinez's eyes widened with understanding. Tommy Sullivan. He made another call, I think to his father, Judge Sullivan. 20 minutes later, a second car arrived. 2 men got out and loaded Katie into the back seat. Tommy drove away in his car and the other men drove off with Katie. You think they helped her disappear? I think they were going to, but something went wrong. Maybe her injuries were worse than they looked. Maybe, Sarah couldn't finish the thought. Why didn't you come forward? Sarah laughed bitterly. I was 17 years old, and I'd just watched the town's golden boy and the most powerful judge in the county cover up a hit and run. Who would have believed me? And if they had, you were afraid, terrified. Judge Sullivan owned half the town. Tommy was everyone's hero. I was nobody, a scholarship kid from the wrong side of the tracks. So I kept quiet, and I've regretted it every day since. Martinez sat back in his chair, processing the information. If Katie survived long enough to have the baby, and if Jennifer Hartwell is that baby, then we're looking at a 30-year-old conspiracy involving some very powerful people. Tommy Sullivan is Senator Sullivan now, Sarah said quietly, and his father is still alive, still connected. If they were willing to cover up vehicular assault 30 years ago, what would they do to protect that secret now? You think Jennifer found out the truth about her mother? I think Jennifer started asking questions, maybe got too close to the truth, and I think someone decided she was a threat. Martinez began gathering the files. We need to find Jennifer Hartwell, and we need to do it fast. If she's discovered the connection between Katie Morrison and Senator Sullivan, she could be in real danger. What about Emma? The girl stays where she is for now. If we're right about this, she's the only living link to a crime that could destroy careers and lives. She's safer in Pittsburgh, out of sight. Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. Detective, there's one more thing. Emma has been humming Katie's song Nonstop. What if it's not just a family tune? What if Katie taught it to her daughter for a reason? What if it's some kind of message? Martinez looked at her sharply. What kind of message? I don't know, but Katie was smart, and she was scared. If she knew she was in danger, if she suspected someone might come after her or her daughter someday, maybe she embedded something in that song. A clue, a location, something only someone who knew the whole story would understand. Do you remember the words? Sarah closed her eyes and let the melody wash over her. Katie's voice as clear as if she was sitting in the room. Slowly, she began to sing the old folk song, her voice trembling with emotion and memory. Down by the water where the willows grow, secrets buried deep below. Listen close and you will hear. Truth that some hold dear, by the bridge where waters flow, that's where all the answers go. Martinez wrote frantically as Sarah sang. When she finished, he looked up with excitement in his eyes. Miller's Creek Bridge, the same place where you last saw Katie alive. Sarah nodded. If Katie survived, if she had time to plan before she disappeared or died, she might have hidden something there. Evidence, documents, something to protect her daughter's future. We need to search that area, Martinez said, standing up. And we need to do it tonight, before word gets out that we're reopening this case. As they prepared to leave the station, Sarah felt the weight of 30 years lifting from her shoulders, replaced by a different kind of fear. She was finally going to learn the truth about what happened to Katie Morrison, but that truth might be more dangerous than the secret she'd been keeping. Somewhere out there, Jennifer Hartwell was either hiding from the same forces that had destroyed her mother, or she was already dead, another victim of a conspiracy that had started with a teenage pregnancy and a cowardly boy who chose his future over justice. And in Pittsburgh, 8-year-old Emma Hartwell continued to hum her grandmother's song, carrying a message she didn't understand from a woman she'd never met, a message that might be the key to solving a 3-decade-old mystery and saving what was left of her family. The past, Sarah realized, was never really buried. It just waited underground, like seeds in winter soil, ready to sprout when the conditions were right. And now, after 30 years of silence, the truth was finally ready to bloom. The Miller's Creek Bridge looked exactly as Sarah remembered it, though 30 years had weathered the old stone structure and overgrown the walking path with brambles and wild honeysuckle. Detective Martinez parked his patrol car at the edge of the woods, and they made their way through the darkness with flashlights, the sound of rushing water growing louder as they approached the creek. It's different than I expected, Martinez said, examining the area around the bridge. Smaller. Sarah nodded, understanding what he meant. Childhood memories had a way of making everything seem larger and more dramatic than reality. The bridge that had loomed so large in her nightmares was really just a simple stone arch over a narrow creek, unremarkable except for the weight of history it carried. Katie and I used to sit right there, she said, pointing to a flat rock beside the water. She said it was her thinking place. They spent an hour searching the area with their flashlights, looking for any sign of disturbance or hidden objects. The bridge itself yielded nothing, but when Sarah crouched beside the old oak tree where she'd hidden 30 years ago, her fingers found something that made her heart race. "Detective, over here." Carved into the bark, almost invisible with age and growth, were the initials KM, and below them, barely legible, JH 1995. "Katie Morrison and Jennifer Hartwell," Martinez breathed. "She was here after the accident. She survived." Sarah traced the letters with her finger, feeling the rough bark that had grown over Katie's desperate message. She came back, maybe to leave something for her daughter to find. They expanded their search, focusing on the area around the oak tree. It was Sarah who found the loose stone at the base of the tree, and beneath it, wrapped in layers of plastic and oilcloth, a metal box no bigger than a cigar case. Inside were documents that told a story of survival, desperation, and a mother's love that transcended death itself. The first document was a birth certificate for Jennifer Catherine Hartwell, born February 14, 1995, in a Philadelphia hospital. The father was listed as unknown, but there was a handwritten note in the margin. Tommy Sullivan told him 8/15/95, he knows. The second document was more damaging, a confession written in Katie's careful handwriting, detailing the night of the accident and the cover-up that followed. She described being conscious when Tommy found her, how he'd made the phone calls, how Judge Sullivan and another man had arrived to take her away. "Listen to this," Martinez said, reading from Katie's confession by flashlight. "They took me to a cabin outside town. Judge Sullivan said I was a problem that needed to be solved permanently. Tommy was crying, begging his father not to hurt me. I think he believed they were going to kill me. But they didn't," Sarah said. "No. She writes here that she convinced them she would disappear forever, never tell anyone what happened. She was bleeding internally and Judge Sullivan said she'd probably die anyway from her injuries. They drove her to Philadelphia and left her at a hospital with a fake ID." Sarah felt tears sliding down her cheeks as the story unfolded. Katie had survived, had given birth to Jennifer, had lived for years in hiding, always looking over her shoulder, always afraid that the Sullivans would find her and finish what they'd started. The most heartbreaking document was a letter addressed to Jennifer, written in Katie's shaking handwriting and dated just 2 years ago. "My dearest daughter," it began, "if you are reading this, then the worst has happened, and they have found us. I have spent your entire life trying to protect you from the truth, but I realize now that ignorance will not keep you safe. You deserve to know who you are and what was stolen from us." The letter went on to detail everything: the accident, the cover-up, the years of hiding. Katie explained how she'd changed her name, created a new identity, worked menial jobs to keep them invisible. She'd never contacted her own parents, never let Jennifer know she had grandparents in Millbrook, because she knew the Sullivans had influence everywhere. She says here that she taught Jennifer the old song as a safety measure, Martinez said. If anything ever happened to Katie, Jennifer was supposed to come back to Millbrook, find this hiding place, and use the evidence to protect herself. But Jennifer disappeared before she could get the evidence, Sarah realized. Someone found out she was asking questions. The final document in the box was the most recent, a newspaper clipping from 3 months ago showing Senator Tommy Sullivan at a campaign fundraiser. Someone had circled his face in red ink and written in the margin, "He killed my mother." Martinez sat back on his heels. Jennifer figured it out. She saw this photo, maybe recognized something about him, and started digging into her mother's past. "And someone noticed," Sarah said grimly. They were interrupted by the sound of a car engine, headlights cutting through the darkness as a vehicle pulled up near Martinez's patrol car. Both officers reached for their weapons, but the figure that emerged from the darkness was unexpected. "Detective Martinez, I'm Margaret Hartwell, Emma's grandmother." The elderly woman who approached them moved with the careful deliberation of someone who had once been strong, but was now held together by pure determination. She was probably in her 70s, with silver hair and eyes that held the same sadness Sarah had seen in Emma's face. "Mrs. Hartwell," Martinez said, lowering his weapon but keeping it ready. "How did you find us here?" "I followed you from the police station. I've been waiting 30 years for someone to finally look into what happened to Katie Morrison." She looked directly at Sarah. "You're the teacher, aren't you? The one who called about Emma's humming?" Sarah nodded. "Mrs. Hartwell, we found Katie's evidence. We know what happened. Margaret's face crumpled with relief. Thank God. I was starting to think the truth would die with me. You knew? Martinez asked. I suspected. When Jennifer came to live with us after her husband died, she was always asking questions about her past. She'd hired a private investigator to look for her birth parents. 3 months ago, she came to me with old newspaper articles about Katie Morrison's accident and asked if I thought there was a connection. What did you tell her? The truth. That her late husband had found her as a baby, abandoned at a Pittsburgh shelter, with nothing but a fake birth certificate and a lullaby she used to sing. We never questioned it. We were just grateful to give her a home. Sarah felt the pieces clicking into place. Jennifer wasn't Katie's daughter by blood. She was found as a baby. Margaret nodded. But Katie must have left her at that shelter, left her with people who would love her and keep her safe from the Sullivans. Jennifer was the child Katie saved by giving her up. Which means Emma, Martinez began. Emma is Katie's great-granddaughter, but she's also the granddaughter of whoever Jennifer really was. Katie saved a baby and raised her as her own daughter, creating a family bound by love rather than blood. The revelation recontextualized everything. Katie hadn't just survived the accident. She'd spent years rescuing other people's children, creating a family from the pieces of her shattered life. Jennifer had been her daughter in every way that mattered, and Emma was the continuation of that legacy of love and protection. Mrs. Hartwell, Sarah said gently, where is Jennifer now? The old woman's composure finally broke. I don't know. She left 6 weeks ago to confront Senator Sullivan. She said she had enough evidence to destroy him, that she was going to make him pay for what he did to Katie. I begged her not to go, told her it was too dangerous, but she said she couldn't let Emma grow up in a world where men like that had power. She went to see Sullivan? Martinez asked. She drove to Harrisburg, said she was going to his campaign office, was going to show him the evidence and demand the truth. That was the last time I saw her. Martinez was already on his radio, calling for backup and putting out an APB for Jennifer Hartwell. If she'd confronted Sullivan 6 weeks ago and then disappeared, the implications were terrifying. There's something else, Margaret said quietly. Emma has been having nightmares. She wakes up crying, saying she can hear her mama calling for help. The humming started right after the nightmares began. Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. Children were more intuitive than adults gave them credit for. If Emma was unconsciously picking up on some connection to her mother's disappearance. We need to get back to Pittsburgh, she said. If Jennifer is still alive, if she's being held somewhere, Emma might be the key to finding her. What do you mean? Martinez asked. The song. It's not just a lullaby. It's a map. Katie used it to mark hiding places, to communicate with Jennifer. What if Jennifer is trying to use it to communicate with Emma? What if the reason Emma can't stop humming is because her mother is somehow sending her a message? It sounded crazy, but as they packed up Katie's evidence and prepared to leave Miller's Creek Bridge, Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that they were missing something crucial. Emma's behavior wasn't just trauma response. It was purposeful, urgent, as if she was trying to tell them something, but didn't have the words. The drive back to Pittsburgh took 3 hours, but Sarah's mind was racing faster than the car. By the time they reached the city, she had convinced Martinez to let her try something that went against all conventional wisdom about child psychology. They were going to ask Emma to help them find her mother. At Margaret Hartwell's small house on the outskirts of Pittsburgh, they found Emma sitting at the kitchen table, coloring in a book with mechanical precision. She looked up when they entered, and Sarah saw something in the child's eyes that hadn't been there before, a clarity, as if she'd been waiting for them. Mrs. Chen, Emma said softly, I knew you would come. Mama told me in my dream. Sarah knelt beside Emma's chair. Sweetheart, we found some things that belong to your great-grandmother Katie. We think your mama might be in trouble, and we need your help to find her. Emma nodded gravely. She's in the place where the water sings. I can hear it when I hum the song, Margaret gasped. The old Morrison farm, there's a well there, artesian spring. The water makes a singing sound when the wind blows across it just right. Martinez was already on his phone, coordinating with local law enforcement. But Sarah stayed focused on Emma, recognizing the courage it must have taken for this 8-year-old to carry such a burden. Emma, you've been very brave. Your mama would be proud of you. I know, Emma said simply. She told me that too. She said to keep singing until someone who understood came to help. As police cars raced toward the abandoned Morrison farm and Sarah held Emma's small hand in hers, she realized that Katie's song had done exactly what it was meant to do. It had connected 3 generations of women across time and trauma, creating a lifeline that led from a 17-year-old girl's desperate hope to an 8-year-old's unconscious wisdom. The truth was finally coming to light, carried on the wings of an old folk melody that had refused to be silenced. But Sarah knew the hardest part was yet to come, finding Jennifer before it was too late and ensuring that Emma's childhood didn't end the way Katie's had, with violence and secrets and the bitter taste of justice denied. The song was almost over, but Sarah prayed it wouldn't end in tragedy. The Morrison farm had been abandoned for over a decade, its weathered buildings and overgrown fields a testament to dreams that had died with the family that once lived there. Sarah rode with Detective Martinez in the lead car, while Margaret and Emma followed in a social services vehicle, despite Martinez's initial protests about bringing a child to what might be a crime scene. "She needs to be here," Sarah had argued. "If Jennifer is alive, she'll need to see Emma to know she's safe. And if we're wrong about the location..." She didn't finish the thought, but they all understood. Emma was their only connection to finding Jennifer. The convoy of police cars turned onto the old dirt road just as dawn was breaking, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold that reminded Sarah achingly of mornings she'd spent here with Katie 30 years ago. The irony wasn't lost on her that they'd come full circle, back to the Morrison farm where Katie had grown up, where she'd learned the songs her grandmother had taught her, where she'd dreamed of a future that was stolen from her at 17. The artesian well Margaret had mentioned stood 50 yards from the main house, its stone rim crumbling but still intact. As they approached, Sarah could hear it, the faint musical sound of wind passing over water, like a low whistle or a distant voice calling. It was haunting and beautiful, and she understood immediately why Emma had described it as water singing. "There," Emma said, pointing toward a small stone building Sarah had missed in the darkness. "Mama's in the spring house." Detective Martinez signaled for the other officers to surround the building while he approached the heavy wooden door. It was secured with a new padlock, out of place on the otherwise deteriorated structure. "Jennifer? Jennifer Hartwell?" Martinez called. "This is police. Can you hear me?" The response was weak but unmistakable, a woman's voice, hoarse from dehydration and fear. "Help me, please." The lock yielded to bolt cutters, and Martinez disappeared into the dark interior of the spring house. Sarah held Emma back as the child strained to run to her mother, understanding the little girl's desperation, but knowing she couldn't see Jennifer until they understood her condition. When Martinez emerged 15 minutes later, his expression was grim but relieved. "She's alive, dehydrated, injured but alive. Paramedics are on their way." "Can I see her?" Emma asked, her small voice breaking with emotion. "In a few minutes, sweetheart. Let the doctors help her first." As the paramedics worked to stabilize Jennifer, Sarah pieced together what had happened from Martinez's preliminary questioning. Jennifer had indeed confronted Senator Sullivan 6 weeks ago, armed with Katie's evidence and demanding answers. But instead of meeting with her, Sullivan had contacted his father, the elderly Judge Sullivan, who still maintained connections in law enforcement and government. Within hours of Jennifer's visit to the campaign office, she'd been grabbed from the parking lot of her hotel and brought to the abandoned Morrison farm, a cruel twist that demonstrated how much the Sullivans knew about Katie's history. They'd kept her prisoner in the spring house, the same building where Katie's grandmother had once stored milk and cheese, where Katie herself had played as a child. "They were trying to decide what to do with me," Jennifer told Sarah later, as she held Emma in her arms in the back of the ambulance. Despite her ordeal, the resemblance to Katie was unmistakable. The same gentle eyes, the same stubborn set to her jaw. "The judge wanted to kill me, but Tommy, Senator Sullivan, he's not the same person he was 30 years ago. He has grandchildren now. I think seeing Emma's picture in my purse changed something in him." "Emma's picture?" Jennifer nodded weakly. "I always carry it. When they searched my things, he saw it and just broke down, started crying, saying he couldn't hurt another child's mother. That's when I knew Katie had told me the truth about what happened. But they kept you prisoner. Judge Sullivan overruled his son, said they'd already gone too far to back down now. But Tommy made sure I had food and water." I think he was trying to figure out how to let me go without destroying both their lives. Sarah looked at Emma, who was clinging to her mother with the desperate intensity of a child who had thought she was an orphan. Emma, how did you know where to find your mama? The 8-year-old looked up with those wise, dark eyes. The song told me. When I hummed it, I could hear the water singing back. Mama taught me that when we're scared or lost, the song will help us find our way home. It was, Sarah realized, exactly what Katie would have done, turned an old folk tune into a survival tool, a way for her family to find each other even in the darkest circumstances. The song that had haunted Sarah's nightmares for 30 years had become a beacon of hope for a new generation. The confrontation with Senator Sullivan came 3 hours later at the Millbrook police station. He arrived with his lawyers, his campaign manager, and the defeated air of a man who knew his career was over. At 67, Tommy Sullivan bore little resemblance to the golden boy who had driven away from Katie's broken body 30 years ago. Power and guilt had carved deep lines in his face, and when he saw Jennifer sitting beside Detective Martinez, he looked as if he might collapse. "I never meant for it to go this far," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "After the accident, I tried to tell my father we should confess, but he said it would destroy our family. I was young and scared, and I believed him. You left Katie to die," Sarah said, speaking for the first time since entering the interrogation room. Sullivan looked at her with recognition dawning in his eyes. "Sarah Chen, you were there that night. You saw everything. I saw you choose your future over Katie's life. I saw you make a call to your father instead of calling an ambulance. I know. I've regretted it every day for 30 years. When Jennifer came to my office with the evidence, I knew it was finally time to face what I'd done." "Then why didn't you?" Martinez asked. "Why keep her prisoner instead of coming forward?" Sullivan's lawyer leaned forward to whisper in his ear, but the senator waved him away. "Because my father still had connections, still had the power to make problems disappear. When I told him about Jennifer's visit, he took over, arranged for her to be taken to the farm, said we'd figure out a permanent solution later." "You mean murder?" "I couldn't let that happen. I've made terrible choices, but I'm not a killer. I was planning to let her go, to help her disappear like Katie did. But then my father found out and threatened to have her killed if I interfered." The confession continued for hours, unraveling 3 decades of cover-ups and corruption. Judge Sullivan, it turned out, had used his influence to suppress evidence, intimidate witnesses, and protect his son's career at any cost. When Katie had survived the accident, he'd seen her as a loose end that needed to be eliminated. Only her willingness to disappear permanently had saved her life. "Where is your father now?" Martinez asked. Sullivan's composure finally cracked. "Dead. Heart attack 2 days ago. When he realized Jennifer had escaped and the police were investigating, the stress killed him. In the end, the secret he spent 30 years protecting destroyed him anyway." Sarah felt a strange mixture of justice and sadness at the news. Judge Sullivan had escaped earthly consequences for his crimes, but his death had finally freed his son to tell the truth. The legal proceedings that followed were complex and heavily publicized. Senator Sullivan resigned from office and pled guilty to charges related to Katie's hit-and-run and Jennifer's kidnapping. His cooperation with prosecutors, combined with his father's death, resulted in a plea deal that sent him to prison for 8 years. Not enough, in Sarah's opinion, but more justice than she'd ever expected to see. The media attention was intense but brief. The story of the teacher who recognized an old folk song and uncovered a 30-year-old conspiracy captured public imagination for a few weeks before being replaced by newer scandals and tragedies. For Sarah, the resolution brought a peace she hadn't felt since she was 17 years old. Standing at Katie's graveside, a proper burial at last, after her remains were found in an unmarked grave outside Philadelphia, she finally spoke the words she'd carried for 3 decades. "I'm sorry I didn't come forward sooner. I'm sorry I let fear keep me silent while you were suffering. But I promise you, Katie, Emma will grow up knowing the truth. She'll know how brave her great-grandmother was, how much she loved her family, how she turned a simple song into a lifeline that saved 2 generations. Emma stood beside her, holding a bouquet of wildflowers and humming softly. But the tune was different now. Not the haunting melody of loss and longing, but a gentler version, peaceful and resolved. The song of someone who had found her way home. 6 months later, Sarah received a letter from Jennifer, who had moved with Emma to a small town in Oregon where they could start fresh, away from the shadows of Millbrook and the weight of their tragic history. "Emma has stopped humming the old song," Jennifer wrote. "She says it's not needed anymore, that Mama Katie can rest now that everyone knows the truth. She's learning new songs in school, happy ones about friendship and adventure and all the possibilities that lie ahead. I think that's what Katie would have wanted most of all." The letter included a photo of Emma on her first day at her new school, backpack on her shoulders and a bright smile on her face. She looked like any other 9-year-old, excited about the future, unburdened by the secrets that had shaped her early years. Sarah kept the photo on her desk at Lincoln Elementary, where she continued teaching 3rd grade and watching for the signs that told her when a child was carrying burdens too heavy for their young shoulders. She'd learned that sometimes the most important thing a teacher could do was simply listen to the words children spoke and the songs they sang, to the messages they carried in their behavior and their silences. The classroom was different now, filled with the same energy and chaos of 8-year-olds, but Sarah approached her work with a deeper understanding of how the past could shape the present and how adults had the power to break cycles of pain or perpetuate them. On quiet afternoons, when her students were reading independently and the autumn light slanted through the windows just right, Sarah sometimes found herself humming Katie's old song. But like Emma's version, it had changed, become something softer, more hopeful, a song about secrets finally told, about justice delayed but not denied, about the power of love to transcend even death. The melody carried on the wind, connecting past and present, teacher and student, the living and the dead. And in that connection, Sarah found the peace that had eluded her for 30 years. Emma Hartwell had stopped humming, but her great-grandmother's song lived on, not as a cry for help or a map to hidden truths, but as a lullaby of love and protection, sung by one generation to comfort the next, ensuring that the cycle of secrets and shame was finally forever broken. The story that began with a child's inexplicable humming had ended with the healing of old wounds and the promise of new beginnings. And in a small classroom in Pittsburgh, Sarah Chen smiled as she watched her students write their own stories, knowing that she would always be listening for the songs they carried in their hearts.